allowed me to go get my tripod and set up so we got a better camera angle and all of that stuff. But this is part one of our two-parter weekend Q&A. We always do that. We are now doing that Fridays and Saturdays. Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern and Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, with Sundays now being a day where we do a live lecture, which hopefully will branch off into a podcast-like format sooner rather than later. So this is this is the part of the week I produce history content, social studies content all during the week, short range videos, long range videos, all of that good stuff. So this is the part of the week where you get to give back, where I get to give back to you, and instead of listening to me talk, you guys get to bring up questions that you would like to know about, different historical topics that you are interested in, and I will address them as soon as possible. That's my goal, to answer your questions, to tell you more about history, to learn about some of it myself. People bring up topics and I learn about it all the time. So this is a place where you get to ask questions that are really important to you about social studies and history, and I will give you the best possible answer that I can. So we used to do it every Saturday, then we extended to Sunday because people wanted more, and people just want more and more of friendly neighborhood history, and I really appreciate that. So now we do Fridays and Saturdays. Start your weekend, enjoy the prime 2 days of your weekend with some history, with some friendly neighborhood history, and with some important historical topics. And then Sundays is the live lecture, which hopefully will be able to turn into more of a Q&A style thing, more of a podcast-like thing as time goes on. But if you want to become a friendly neighborhood historian, if you love learning about history, and if you love social studies and all of those things, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. The goal is to hit 6,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We're nearly 5,200 strong, so becoming a friendly neighborhood historian is as easy as liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel to grow. It really creates a difference. And so we've got all sorts of wonderful topics that we can get into. People bring up all sorts of great questions, and that really helps the channel grow. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, part one of our two-part weekend Q&A, Friday night and Saturday night. Drop any questions, social studies related, social science related, geopolitical related, past and present, in the chat. Any topics, comments, areas of the world you want me to cover in their history, and I will get to them. That is what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. We talk about history, we expand your knowledge, and I can't tell you how many times I've learned something about history just from people bringing up topics I wasn't familiar with. So we've got all sorts of really wonderful stuff that we talk about here on the channel that people ask about. And if you want to learn more about history, if you really like social studies and social sciences, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. I'm trying to hit 6,000, a legion of friendly neighborhood historians by the end of the year. And becoming a friendly neighborhood historian has never been easier, folks. It doesn't involve paying. It doesn't involve any weird infomercials. All it does is involve you guys liking and subscribing. That is how you become a friendly neighborhood historian. And just follow the content. We've got short form content daily and at least one long form video a week. We just dropped a really, really fun video. I really enjoyed making it and learning about it, about Halloween last night, and that was a lot of fun, learning more about Halloween and bringing that information about Halloween to you guys. So if you like learning about history, if you enjoy social studies, this is the place for you. Any topics you want to talk about, learn more about, or discover, be sure to drop it in the chat, and I will get to it in a timely manner. And my wonderful moderator, Simon the Bunny, is there to make sure to monitor the traffic, and he's got my social media handles in the chat. If you want to follow me on X, Instagram, or Facebook, I'm right there for you guys. It'd be great to connect with you guys there, hear about topics there, and I drop content there as well. So anyways, let's see. I don't know what you're saying there, Fafa. Oh, from Vietnam. Wonderful, Vip. Thank you for joining us. So many people, especially in the West, only know about Vietnam and its history basically during, of course, because of the United States war. They don't know about French colonization. They don't know about Japanese oppression during World War II. They don't know about the Dai Viet. They don't know how Vietnam is one of the few countries in the world that was actually able to withstand the Mongol hordes and outsmart and defeat them and keep Southeastern Asia away from Mongol control. They don't know anything about that, but some really amazing history in Southeastern Asia that we don't know nearly enough about. So thank you, Vip, for joining us. I hope you're still there. And if you like learning about history, yes, the history of your homeland, of Vietnam, like and subscribe. Hello, Jidarinda, welcome. Thank you for joining us in the Friendly Neighborhood History, part one of 2 weekend Q&As today and tomorrow. So hopefully you guys come back tomorrow too. We'll have more topics and stuff like that. Piers is saying, I don't believe in history. Yeah, that's a common view people have, and the people who have that often are part of history. Napoleon said that history is a fable we all just agree on, and Henry Ford said it's bunk. But that's throwing a level of relativism around a subject that is not relativistic. We don't have a theory of relativity in history. We have a theory of fact in history. Ewan, welcome. You've got your shout out, and you can go ahead and subscribe. Hawest is asking, what do I think about Kurdistan? Well, I think there should be a Kurdistan. I think that the Kurdish people have been a unique people in the Middle East for a long time, and they've kind of gotten caught up in the different political, religious battles, especially between different Islamic groups. And so I think Kurdistan, Stan, when we look at all these countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, all Stan means is nation. So it is or land of. So Afghanistan is the land of the Afghans. Pakistan is the land of the Pakis, which that doesn't really make much sense because Pakistan was originally part of the Indian subcontinent, but was divided from India by the British because of the Muslim majority in Pakistan and the Hindu majority in India. So, yeah. So that's what I think about Kurdistan. Let's see here. Yeah, I've heard that. That's going to be really interesting. Nosferatu, one of the most important movies of the era. You know what? If that lamp is really bothering, let me try without the lamp. So now we get, yeah, that's probably better lighting. But now I've got this dark face. I got this Two-Face going on, like from Batman. But anyways, so let's see. Tabs is saying, what does Zimbabwe mean? Now, Zimbabwe, I don't know exactly what it means. I believe it's a Bantu word. But it might be Swahili, but it refers to if Zimbabwe as a country is named after an ancient African city in South Africa, in the southern regions of Africa, called Great Zimbabwe. And it was one of the greatest city-states in history. It was rich, it was powerful, it was a center of learning and trade for hundreds of years. So. And yes, Kurdistan is definitely the largest nation without a country. Yes, I do speak fast. That's my habit. I'm trying to beat Ben Shapiro's Guinness Book of World Records for talking fast. So anyways, if you guys have something social studies related, history related that you want to learn more about, drop that in the chat. Ask anything. This is what we're here for. Oh, Jarinda is asking more of a geopolitical question, but that's all right. We like geopolitical questions here. I try to answer that as objectively as possible. Why is America helping Israel? This is something that a lot of people are wondering, especially now due to the war in Gaza. And here's the best thing I can tell you. Here's my best answer to that. Basically, the United States is helping Israel. Excuse me for a second. Because Israel and the United States have a lot of shared values. They're both democracies. And they both have elected governments with certain principles and freedoms. There is no other real democracy in the Middle East except for Israel. And because of that, the United States feels that because it helped create Israel after World War II and the atrocities of the Holocaust, that the United States is beholden to protect and defend Israel and keep the flame of democracy and the survival of the Jewish people, of which there are many Jews in America, alive. So one reason is that Israel is similar to the United States and structured similarly. It is a democracy with an elected government and certain guaranteed basic natural rights and freedoms. And also another huge reason is that there is a large Jewish population in the United States with ties to Israel. So people who are Jewish, almost without exception, know someone who went through October 7th and the atrocities there. They have family living in Israel. I mean, one of the biggest Jewish toasts in different celebrations is next year in Jerusalem. So there's a lot of Jews in America. For a long time, there were more Jews in New York City than there were in Israel. Now there's more Jews in Israel than there are in the United States, but the United States is the second closest, and it's really close between first and second. And I think third place is Great Britain, and it's not even close. So there's something about that. Tabs is saying, so Black Mirror's You believe in aliens, Running Man? I mean, the more we look at it, the more historical. There's not a huge amount of historical evidence for aliens, unless we've been interpreting certain historical data points wrong, and it's actually more like aliens could be involved with that. I don't particularly believe that, but some historians are very open to that. And I think that more and more people are saying that there's something out there that we don't know. I'm not a scientist, but when you consider the vast sheer enormosity of the world, of the universe, of the galaxy, and this Earth is just is the only place, to assume that Earth is the only place out of thousands of galaxies and billions of stars and trillions of planets, and an ever expanding universe where our understanding of it is also expanding. To say that that is the only planet that can habitate life is probably not true. And there's a lot of people who believe that Mars also once could have had life. So because there's evidence of water and things, which is a sign of life. That's where life began on Earth, anyways. At least according to science. So Black Mirror is saying Trump. Yes. So we are right before the 2024 election here in the United States, and I am going to be doing a deep delve in my live stream lecture, which hopefully will evolve into a podcast-like form, the Friendly Neighborhood Podcast. I will be discussing that Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern time here on the channel, and I will be doing a screencast video. Don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll figure it out. Making a prediction about the American presidential election using one of those maps. Maybe you guys have seen some of these videos. They're really popular on YouTube. I'll be making a prediction, trying to do it as objectively as possible and from a historical lens. And in July, when President Biden dropped out of the U.S. presidential race, I knew that it was a historic thing because we haven't had a sitting president do that in 56 years here. And obviously, Kamala Harris is the first woman of color to be at the top of either party's ticket running for president. And so this is a historical election. Former President Trump is running to be the second president only to win 2 non-consecutive terms, Grover Cleveland being the first and only in the 1880s and 90s. So the point being, this is an extremely historic election in the United States, and I knew that, and I didn't want to wait till the history books had already written everything, and it's 10 years later, and my channel is way past all of that. I wanted to talk about it now, so I do a weekly This Week in Politics video. This one will be the penultimate one, because obviously next Tuesday, and then a few days after that probably, Americans will be sorting out their elections and finding out who the winner is. And so I do a video. It usually drops sometime on the weekend, discussing what happened this previous week in politics. So I'll be making one either tonight or tomorrow, or even Sunday, discussing how the presidential campaign continues to unfold, and there are minute-long shorts. Most of the videos and content on this channel are shorts, so please check those out after we're done with this live stream. And like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and that's how easy it is to become a friendly neighborhood historian. Just like and subscribe. So I've got a penultimate one coming out talking about the last week of the election, where everything is kind of slowing down and everyone is kind of noticing how close this election really is. And then next week's one, we'll look at obviously the results and talk about that and everything going on. So a lot to uncover there. But basically, this is a historic American election. As a historian, I wanted to get involved in it ahead of time. And I try to discuss geopolitics and things like that as objectively as possible. That's my gift to you. So anyways, let me see. Going ahead, Tebs. So Tebs is saying, I'm so worried about the election. What's your prediction? Who will win? Tebs, if you're still here, you just got to hear me talk about how objective I try to be on this issue. Right now, if I had to guess, if I had to bet money on it, and I don't have to bet money, I do think this election is relatively close, but I'd have to say that former President Trump probably is going to win. I don't know by how much he's going to win. I don't know what's going to go on. I know there's a lot of people I know who will rejoice and dance in the streets should Trump win. And there's a lot of people that are going to do the cry and scream if he wins. And there's a lot of people who, if you flip it around, I know who will dance in the streets if Vice President Harris wins. So I know a lot of people on both sides. I know how they think. I know what they talk about and where they come from. And I try to make as an informed decision as possible as an American, all of that good stuff. So Caro is saying Israel can defend itself. Let's keep our money in the U.S. Yes, that's a common new perspective on neo-isolationism, which, I don't like the dark. I'm going to turn this light back on. So there we go. Now you can see me a little bit better. Let me turn it around so we get rid of the glare. Yeah, that's the best we're going to do. So anyways, what's my point? My point is this. When it comes to Israel, when it comes to the U.S., there's a rise in neo-isolationist thinking, surprisingly in the Republican Party of all places, with President Trump and other people who are around him, where basically the people are saying the United States should take care of its own issues, mass immigration problems, economic issues, low birth rates, all of these sociological problems before it starts taking on the problems of the other world, and the United States should kind of think to itself. And there have been many times where massive worldwide conflicts have pushed the United States towards this isolationist perspective. After World War I is a great example. In the interwar years, the United States was not as isolationist as some historians make it out to be, but it did kind of embrace more of an isolationist fervor after World War I. So that's something to look at. So we'll see. If Trump gets elected, there might be this surge in neo-isolationism. I don't know if Trump would turn his back on Israel. He was extremely supportive of him during his first term. So we'll see what happens there. Some neo-isolationists, particularly on the Republican side, I like to think cherry pick. Oh, we can't help Ukraine, but we'll help Israel. Why? You have to explain to us why that is. But anyways, Israel can defend itself. Israel is an alliance. Israel is an ally of the United States, that's for sure. Israel democracy, you said you never support. I don't know what you mean by that, Black Mirror. Israel is the most open to LGBTQIA plus people in the Middle East, by far. It doesn't have gay marriage like the United States and Great Britain do. There's a large, strong bulwark of ultra-Orthodox people there, or ultra-Orthodox Jews who believe that marriage is between one man and one woman like many Christians do. And they are kind of perhaps holding that back. But Tel Aviv has the largest pride celebration in the world every June. I mean, the Israelis are very, 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 very open and accepting of different peoples. There's 2 million Arabs who live in Israel, and there are large numbers of gay Israelis who can practice their sexuality openly. So, yes, and thank you, Simon. Come to that live stream on Sunday. Check it out. I'm talking about elections. I'm talking about this election, but I'm also talking about the history of elections and how Americans do elections and why everyone is so darn confused about them all the time. Really some important stuff there. Northam is saying, I love the Jewish people and the Jewish people love me. Well, yes, I've felt that before. Some of the closest and most important people in my life have been Jews. And I'm not Jewish myself, but I've danced in synagogues and gone to different celebrations and worn kippah many times. I know exactly how Jews think and where a lot of them are coming from. KM is, I don't know what you're saying about that. I don't know what you mean by our ancestors being ascended. Most of them are probably dead. Running Man's asking, I don't pay any attention to that. In fact, when I was growing up, the History Channel talked about history. I don't really watch the History Channel anymore unless I want to watch Pawn Stars. So I'm not a huge fan of the History Channel. There's some good documentaries on there. Like if you watch in the morning, there's some good stuff. And of course, there's some historical documentaries that I've watched time and time again on the History Channel that are just a lot of fun and really, really interesting. But Ancient Aliens and other shows are how they've kind of gotten away from the history, and so I'm not huge into that. Thank you. I like this shirt a lot. It's kind of got that gnarled, furled thing, so I really appreciate that, Serpico. Louis Zafir Boston is asking, what was the reason behind the U.S. going after Gaddafi and collapsing the region? So this is contemporary history. Muammar Gaddafi was the dictator of Libya for 3 decades, was known as very much as something of a terrorist, obviously very militant, very repressive of his people. And so there was this idea, and really at the end of the day, if you want to know what I think, when I say idea, if you want to know what history is about ideas. Things happen for a reason. They don't just happen out of nowhere. Everything happens for a reason. People love to say this cliche, but it is true when it comes to history. And the thing that drives history and moves history forward is ideas. I've said this in videos. I've said this on live streams before. And so one of the ideas, and ties into Israel and the democracy thing, was promoting democracy or at least changes of regime in the Middle East and North Africa during the 2010s. And so this led to the Arab Spring. As young people and student movements really wanted to try out democracy, there were protests, revolts, and riots. And the United States strengthened and sided with different rebels in Syria, rebels in Iran. There were rebellions in Iran, starting like this is where in 2009, Hosni Mubarak died, and there was this idea that Egypt could be turned into a democracy, and then Libya, and every single place it was tried, it kind of didn't work because those areas of the world do not seem as fitted for democracy as perhaps the Western world is. And so Gaddafi was overthrown based on the idea of the United States foreign policy at the time that aiding these rebels and not understanding who they were and that they have their own predilections, some of them are quite radicalized, might lead to problems. And no one anticipated that Libya would be resistant to democracy. But if contemporary U.S. foreign policy and history has shown us anything since September 11th, 2001, the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, the efforts in Iran, and of course the Arab Spring in Egypt and Syria and Libya, where Gaddafi was brought down, these places are not suited for democracy, at least not right now. So there's just something there. Vote for me, 2024. I'll drink to that. I'm definitely down for that. Thank you, Golden. I don't know what I would do. I wouldn't be a very good president because I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and I'm underage anyways. But heck, I mean, anything's better, right? At least that's what people are telling me. You're too rich, you stop caring about politics. That's funny. Ooh, Jarenda is asking about the Russian and Ukraine war. So, yeah, I've talked about this on the channel a lot. And my perspective on the Russian-Ukrainian war has shifted as I've started to see that the war, I originally thought this was an existential survival war for the Ukrainians, that they had to win this war or they would be destroyed. And now I'm more of the mindset that this war could possibly have an end where where neither side wins and the Russians go away. And I would prefer that option, personally. Russia has always had a vested interest in Ukraine. They consider the Ukrainians to be Russians. They consider them to be second-class citizens, though. Russians have a very, very long-standing classist approach to different peoples, different races, because Russia is as big as it is, not surprisingly, it's an extremely diverse place. And white Russians are what are part of the group in Ukraine. These are not considered purebred Russians. They're more European Russians than anything. But they are above other groups like Turks and other groups like that. But these Russians are so the Ukrainians have been controlled. You could argue that Russia starts with Ukraine. The Kievan Rus in the 10th century and 11th century and the 12th century was Russia, was the first permanent state in that region of the world. And they converted to Orthodox Christianity, and that is why Russia is Orthodox to this day. And their capital was Kiev. That's why they're called the Kievan Rus. And now we call that city Kiev, of course. And so the Kievan Rus were were the central dominant power in that region of the Western Ural mountain range for several centuries until they were conquered and subjugated by the Mongols. And after that, the attention shifted from Kiev and it went to Moscow as the spiritual and political center of Russian life. And it was that when Napoleon invaded in the 1800s. He didn't go to St. Petersburg, which was the Tsar's home and the political capital at the time. He went to Moscow, the eternal ancestral capital of the Russian people. But before that, it was Kiev. And a lot of people debate if the Kievan Rus are indeed Russians, if we can call them Russians. But they were the mix of Vikings who married Slavic peoples, and that started to create eventually a gene line that became the Russian people. So my point is the Ukrainians and the Russians have always been tied to one extent or another. There have been many wars fought in Ukraine and over Ukraine. Ukraine was conquered by Poland for a time. In fact, a lot of people don't know that, but in the 1600s, the Polish actually had were the dominant power in Eastern Europe. It's called the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. It conquered Russia for a short period, and it actually created Prussia, which created Germany, which I talked about on the channel last Sunday. But Poland was extremely dominant, and it divided Ukraine with Russia. It conquered Ukraine. But starting in 1657, the Russians went in and invaded Ukraine and took most of it over. And ever since then, until the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine has had a significant, has been under the sphere of influence or direct control of the Russian Empire and then the Soviet Union. So at the end of the day, the Ukrainians have had a lot of ties to Russia. That does not justify what Putin is doing at all. I am not an apologist for Putin by any stretch of the imagination. I do think that if a war ended, he would be in a particularly sensitive and weakened position, and it might lead to the fall of his own government, similar to that of Gaddafi's, but we don't know yet. Point being that the Ukrainians they have a very deep tie to the Russian people, and so that's a little bit of the history about why that happened. So that's about the Russia-Ukrainian war. Hopefully that war ends sooner rather than later. I'm not going to say I'm pro-war, obviously. Golden, I get that you support Trump. Saying it 10 times will not make us understand your views better. Yeah, so this is not an echo chamber. This is a place for free speech, but this isn't a place to rattle on and just troll people. Thank you, Simon. My wonderful moderator, Simon's handling the chat extremely well, as he always does. Serpico is asking who would be better for America in terms of foreign relations. You're asking obviously a political question about Trump and Harris and what's going on there. What's going on there is this. I'm not going to say who would be better because I'm not going to give my opinion. I'm going to analyze their views objectively and mention some of the potential drawbacks. Trump and the Republicans seem to be promoting a new neo-isolationist perspective. This would have America draw back from many international affairs that it's been involved in since World War I, and especially since World War II. We know what happens in the world stage when the United States is not involved like it should be, and when the United States is running away from issues rather than confronting them. So that's a perspective. So that's that perspective, the neo-isolationist perspective. Vice President Harris is going to probably continue most of the foreign policy agenda of President Biden, as the Democrats have shifted into more of a neoliberal, neocon perspective of peace through strength, almost, you could say, where they want to continue to prosecute these wars. They want to make sure that the wars end, but that that civilians are not constantly in danger. But they want to make sure that that Russia is defeated and that the terrorist organizations in the Middle East are defeated. And I would say at the bottom of his heart, Trump probably wants this too. But the neo-isolationist demand can't stand that. So the problem with this is, how long is the United States going to be continued to be involved in different affairs around the world, and what are the long-term consequences? Yes, this has worked extremely well in places like Germany and what we did in World War II and Korea even, but look at Vietnam, look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan. The United States shouldn't always be poking its nose into places. At least that's what the neo-isolationists would say. So the question is there more involvement or more turning into itself? And I might be strawmanning both perspectives. I don't think that the Democrats are warmongers who just want to prosecute wars endlessly, but they will continue the wars until Putin is defeated, and who knows exactly what the outcome of the Middle East war could be. A lot of people are worried it'll cause a third world war. So I'm not sure. So that's not my perspective, but that's just where what I think. That's my perspective without any bias, hopefully. I'm not tipping my hand one way or another. There are consequences to both. There is no ultimate permanent solution. There are only trade-offs. So. Yes, Spencer, you're very welcome. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you really enjoyed it. Oh, Simon's mentioning Stephen Crane. Yes, I just did a quick video, a short one. I sometimes do 15 seconds, sometimes do 60-second shorts, but the vast majority of my work is short content. And yes, if you don't want the ghost of the Civil War writer and realist writer of the late 19th century, Stephen Crane, to come after you, like and subscribe the day after Halloween. Hello, welcome. Welcome to the chat, too. 2 welcomes for you, Winnie. Tebs is saying, in South Africa, it baffles my mind. How can a sane person vote for Kamala? Americans will really shock you. So I think what's happening in the United States, and it's happening all around the world, and people in the United States just don't know about it because most Americans are very anthropocentric and focus on their own country. But what's happening is there's this level of political polarization. I would almost compare it, and this is me not being a scientist, but to electrons starting to heat up and and increase their levels of energy. The political polarization starts very slow, and both sides try to come together, and then like magnetic pulls, the electrons pull them apart, and they go farther and farther away, and more political polarization happens, and then it heats up. And there's such a level of political polarization that people basically on both sides of the political fence, and I'm on X, so I know this is true, follow the channel on X, and I participate there, and I talk about it, and I share political posts sometimes in my feedback on it, criticizing both sides. But the politics today is very much divided. It's very much, I can't see how anyone in their right mind would vote for Trump because he's a racist and a, well, let's just say he would have had fun in Germany in the 1930s as a Nazi. I'm trying not to get deplatformed, but I don't think that would do it. But he's a fascist, he's all of these things. And there's people on the right who are saying Kamala Harris will destroy America, she's a Marxist, she's this and that. And I don't think either of those things are true. I mean, I'm a historian, for crying out loud. Comparing Trump's rally in New York to the Nazi one in 1939 is absurdity. Not because Trump's rhetoric is good or Trump is good, or not because I'm going to vote for him. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is, historically speaking, presidential candidates have gone to Madison Square Garden for decades. Just because that's basically tantamount to Hitler drank water and so did Trump, so Trump is Hitler. That's absurdity. That shows how bad the polarization has gotten in geopolitics. And it's that way in France, where Macron shut down the elections after he lost and then won the second round overwhelmingly. The German AfD party is on the rise, a far-right party that a lot of people have compared to fascists, who really, really are starting to antagonize a lot of people around Germany. There seems to be these political trends of deeper polarization. And Trump might be at the forefront of that because his rhetoric is so offensive to so many people. Milei is doing the same thing, Javier Milei in Argentina. I forget his name, the president of El Salvador, cracking down on crime in the harshest way possible, is turning a lot of people off, although his popularity in his own country is very high. So at the end of the day, it's not that I hear this all the time. I can't in my right mind vote for a felon. I can't in my right mind vote for this woman who no one voted for to begin with. That I hear this all the time. The extremism and the polarization has gotten to high points, and like I said, it's not just in the United States. There seems to be this political shift toward, maybe even to the right, you could say, among a lot of people in this world, that involves neo-isolationism, which involves protectionism and tariffs, and which involves the rise of almost a libertarian approach to government. And that's happening a lot around the world. It's not just in the United States. So, anyways, I hope I answered your question. Again, I'm not going to give my perspective. I'm not going to say this is who I'm voting for and why you should vote for this person, or why you should support this person even if you're not in the United States. I'm not going to do that. Are a Jew? Are you asking if I'm a Jew? No, I am not. I am what is called a Jewish ally. I'm new to America, guys. Yes, you said that. Welcome. Good to have you here. Good to have you. That means two things, especially in this chat. A Fam CB is saying, how come Mormons could have more than one wife? Ooh, so we're now going away from geopolitics and back into history, at least U.S. history. So in the 1820s, during a time of religious revivals where new groups of different religions were becoming more and more popular, one of the biggest religious groups of the time was Joseph Smith supposedly had all of these visions, and eventually he discovers the plate. I mean, that's what he claims. That's what the Mormon Church claims. He discovers these plates, these tablets buried by an ancient Israelite general. And Mormons actually do believe this, that a group of Israelites, before the destruction of the Second Temple in 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar, led by a man named Nephi, Lehi and Nephi, fled to the New World. And they intermarried with the Native Americans and created a civilization here that was destroyed by other murderous Native Americans. And before they were finally destroyed, and they worshipped God, and they followed the Jewish religion. And Jesus came here after he rose from the dead. Again, this is Mormon theology and belief. And he witnessed to the Nephites and the Native Americans. The people, by the way, were called Nephites. And the Nephites were eventually wiped out by other native groups. But before they were wiped out, one of their generals named Moroni, who becomes an angel, he hides a book called the Book of Mormon. Mormon was one of their generals too, who also becomes an angel. And that he hides this book in New York, and they are discovered by Joseph Smith, as he's shown the way in the late 1820s and 1830s. And so Mormonism becomes a popular religion, and one of the requirements for salvation is marriage. And is not just marriage. Now, modern Mormons would say it's just marriage, like Catholics believe in marriage, and Jews, and so many other different religious groups, Muslims. But it's also at first polygamy. It's this belief that men should have more than one wife. They point back to the Old Testament patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who were all, except Isaac, they don't point at Isaac, but Abraham and Jacob and King David and King Solomon, who had multiple wives, as examples that God wanted it to be multiple wives. And so they justified this for a long time based on their theology. They even said that God had multiple wives at some points, or that God has a wife now. So the Mormon Church actually believes in a mother God. Starting in the so this put the Mormons at odds with a lot of other religious groups because polygamy was seemingly completely outdated by that point. It also put them at odds with the American government. So in the 1840s, I want to say 1840s, the Mormons, late 1840s, early 1850s, after Joseph Smith is killed, he was arrested and eventually killed by an angry mob, although and some Mormons say that he is a martyr for being killed by an angry mob in a jail cell. Their second prophet, Brigham Young, who had dozens of wives and hundreds of children and grandchildren, took them across, believed that God was pushing them to leave their new land of Missouri and go west. And they went to the land of the Ute Indians, which became Utah. And they set up shop in Salt Lake City, and that's where the big Mormon tabernacle is. So the Mormons, and they were all polygamists, and this put them at odds with the U.S. government, especially when they wanted to become a state in the late 1800s. And they were at such odds with the U.S. government that eventually they decided to drop the practice of polygamy, strip it from their religious rhetoric, and basically just have one wife for all of life. And it was only after that they were able to become a state. Utah was able to become a state. There are some offshoot radicalized sects of Mormonism which practice polygamy. Some of them have even fled into Mexico so that they could practice it more openly. But it was all religious justification, and you could say that it is a way to continue to dominate women. It's a way to perpetuate patriarchal narratives, and that's definitely true, too. So hopefully I answered your question. Yeah. Oh, I am right. Thank you, Spencer, for backing that up. But good question there. I really appreciate that about the Mormons. Black Mirror, what are you saying about Netanyahu? I don't know what Netanyahu's personal perspective is. I don't think he's personally in favor of gay marriage, but he hasn't done anything to restrict gay rights. I think that he's pretty open to gay rights as far as I know. I don't know enough about his social beliefs. I know about his foreign policy because I'm an American who's not educated enough, apparently. Simon's asking, have I been to Israel? No, I haven't. I would love to go. Beyond any personal spiritual convictions I may or may not have. I think even the most skeptical and atheistic of people should go to Israel because there's so much history there. You have the interplay of the three Abrahamic religions, which basically are responsible for creating the modern world for better or for worse. You have the birthplace of monotheism there to some extent. And you have a lot of amazing history, amazing churches. You can learn a lot about practically about Islam, Judaism, and Christianity by going to Israel, and you can learn a lot about the land and the plight of the Palestinian people and the efforts of the Israelis to create a state there. I try to use as objective and neutral language as possible because I've listened to both sides on this. So I haven't been, but I would like to go, and I encourage everyone to go at some point in their life, regardless of religious conviction. It has such great history to it. I would say the same thing about India because there's a lot of interplay between different religions and beliefs and practices there as well. America has fallen. Well, I don't know about that. People have been dooming on America for a long time. I would say if you want to say America's fallen, you could say that in 1861 much more accurately. 1968 was a tumultuous year. Like I said, this political polarization that pulls Americans apart has happened time and time again, and it's been worse. The problem is it's getting progressively worse, and it almost seems to be going rapidly. So we'll see what happens. Paul's saying, what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah? So Sodom and Gomorrah are two biblical cities who in the biblical narrative are destroyed by God. And they are destroyed by God for a multitude of reasons. Some Christians in the past have emphasized that they were destroyed for their homosexual practices. If you understand history and you learn something about history, history is about human ideas, human nature, the human condition, and how we have always been the same, and we've just acted in different ways and used technology and other things for different advantages. Homosexual people, gay people, LGBTQIA plus people have been around for all of human history. There is no getting around that. You cannot say this is a new fad. What is a new fad, and I wouldn't even call it that, is that it has become more widely accepted. More and more people are openly practicing and okay with that than in past times. There have been some exceptions. I would say ancient Rome and Greece are definitely exceptions, particularly the latter. And perhaps Sodom and Gomorrah, the ancient city-states, like many of the Mesopotamian cities in the Levant and the Fertile Crescent in that time, thousands of years ago, were probably pretty open about it too. But basically, Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, and a lot of Christians have claimed it was because of their practice of homosexuality. If you actually read the biblical narrative, that is mentioned, but it is also their lack of hospitality, lack of kindness towards strangers, all of these things. So it's a conglomeration if you believe the biblical accounts. So Tebs is saying, so good question, Paul. I really appreciate that question. And if you appreciate what I'm talking about, the sociology, the social issues, the history, the background, both ancient and modern history and social studies, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Trying to hit 6,000 by the end of the year, a legion of friendly neighborhood historians, and 5,200 by the end of this stream. So hopefully we've reached that. We're going to go for about another 10 minutes, by the way, guys. I try to do about an hour. And if you want to ask more questions, if you feel that's not enough time to get to stuff you want to talk about, we'll be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time, Fridays and Saturdays. Those are our new times for our two-part Q&A. And Sunday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are doing our podcast live stream, where I lecture about different historical topics that I want to talk about. But here it's what you want to talk about, and I will tell you as much as I can about it. Tebs is saying Israel's a holy land. It's a country loved by God more than any other country on earth. That's a fact. So that's not a fact. That's a religious perspective. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it. I'm saying that's not necessarily a fact. Thank you. I try to be smart. Where are the Jews from? So the Jews, I love what Dave Chappelle says, never start a statement with the Jews, because it already starts to sound kind of bad. But Jewish people are from all over the world. If you're talking about present tense, and I've talked about this on the channel before, there are three different types of Jews, major types of Jews. Ashkenazi Jews, which is the one most people think of when they think of Jews. Ashkenazi Jews are Jews from Europe. Eastern Europe, the Russian Jews, huge amounts of Russian Jews who came over to the United States in the late 19th century. I wrote my college thesis on that. There are large numbers of Jews from Europe, and most of the Jews in America are European Jews or Ashkenazi Jews, and sometimes they are lumped in with white people. Then there are Sephardic Jews or Sephardim. The Sephardim are Jews and it's from an ancient Hebrew word it's from an old Hebrew word for Spain. They are the Jews from North Africa and Spain. North Africa and Spain, why is Spain different than the rest of Europe with the Ashkenazis? Because Spain was conquered by the Muslims and subjugated under them for centuries. And so Spain and North Africa, being part of that Islamic century of conquest in the 600s and 700s, has become, the Jews there consider themselves to be fundamentally different. So they are Sephardic Jews. The last group of Jews is Mizrahim or Mizrahi Jews, which comes from an old name for Moses, or I believe Egypt. Maybe it's Egypt. And that is the Jews from the Middle East and Israel. And those are the Jews those are Mizrahi Jews, Indian, Persian Jews, Believe it or not, there are Indian and Persian Jews. They are Mizrahi. So the Jews originally come from the Levant, and they are, according to the biblical narrative, and there is some history for this, that they were originally controlled by the Egyptians and then went and conquered the land of Israel. There was a Davidic kingdom under King David in the land of Israel, which was eventually divided into a north and south. That was eventually conquered by the Assyrians and the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. And the ancient term for them was Hebrew, which was used as a term for slave by the Egyptians. But that has morphed into becoming the name of their language, the name of their practices, the title of their holy text, the Hebrew Bible or the Tanakh. And so the Jews, basically, if you want a short answer, the Jews come from Israel, the land of Canaan, the land of the Levant. So Spencer's saying, I don't know who you're asking him, but I've been, yes. Thank you, Francois, for recommending. Very nice French name. NFH is asking, who are the 12 tribes? Well, usually that is referring to the 12 tribes of Israel. Again, we're talking a lot about Israel history, and I'm down with it. So according to the biblical narrative, there are the 12 tribes, historically speaking, are the 12 groups of Israel, the 12 different clans in Israel from which all Jews come from. I don't know. Let me see. Can I name all of them? Joseph gets 2, Ephraim and Manasseh, Gad, Naphtali, Asher, Dan, Issachar, Judah, Benjamin. Levi. I kind of lose track of that. But they're the sons of the patriarch from the book of Genesis, Jacob, who supposedly had 12 sons. And one of his sons, Joseph, 2 of his sons get a tribe, so it's 13 really. But those are the 12, based on the 12 sons of Jacob, the different clans and groups of people from Israel. So, I wouldn't say, Paul, that Gaddafi was a hero. I would say that it might have been more prudent to leave him alone and wait for him to die out. And yes, Louis, you are correct. Gaddafi did do that. Gaddafi did a lot of different terrorist activity in the 1980s until he was kind of targeted and defanged by the Americans under Reagan, and then kind of was on the decline, and that's what caused the revolt in the first place. I don't know if the Libyans liked Gaddafi that much when they overthrew him and videotaped humiliating and then killing him. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go as fast as I can. We've got a lot of great questions, a lot of great feedback. I go in order, I just scroll down. I will not silence anyone. No one deserves to be silenced on this. I hope, Paul, that you're still here and you got your answer that you wanted. They are Slavs too. Are you referring to the Jews? Yes, there are Jewish Slavs and Slavic peoples. That's part of the Ashkenazi group. Thank you, Simon, for taking care of that issue. Yes, that's very true, Francois. Hello, welcome. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Ukraine was part of Russia for a long time. A lot of Jews in Ukraine, and that's, again, the Russian Empire. So if you look at the Jews who migrate from the Russian Empire in the late 19th century, most of them come to the United States. Some of them go back to Israel. That's where the movement to repopulate Israel, it's called Zionism, starts from. And a Zionist is basically just someone, historically speaking, who believes that the Jews should live in Israel. Zion is the old term for the city of David, Jerusalem, again, just like Moscow is the historic capital of the Russians, Tel Aviv might be the modern political capital, but for a Jew, Jerusalem is their home capital, is their spiritual capital. So the Jews so when the Russians control the Ukraine, there's a lot of Jews living in the Ukraine as part of the Russian Empire. Some of them migrate to Israel, a lot of them, though, come to the United States. Yeah, war is never a good thing. So, Simon's asking a good question. Is there ever a period in modern history where Jews or Israel didn't take up 50% of online debate? I don't know. I don't want to say they. It's not the Jews who are doing this. People asking and talking about the Jews. It just seems like every conspiracy theory I hear about, every single harebrained attack or criticism ends up with Jews in some way or shape or form. And the Jews, unfortunately, are used to this. It's a terrible, terrible reality of history. During the Black Death, Jews did not get the Black Plague nearly as much as the Europeans did because they were sanitary. They followed rituals from the Old Testament that kept them healthier, and so they didn't get the Black Plague and die from as much. The Europeans saw this and thought it was because they were poisoning the water and that it was the Jewish plague, so they committed horrible atrocities to the Jews during then. During the Crusades, in a fervent attempt to retake the Holy Land, the Christians, who blamed the Jews for killing Christ at the time, slaughtered a bunch of them in different European cities. And of course, the Nazis and what they did. So, and now, I mean, I will say this, compared to ancient long-term slaughters of people, crazy crackpot conspiracies on the internet and disgusting rhetoric, which is totally condemnable, is not as bad, but it's still bad in many, many ways. And people just wanting to, I don't know if there was a time in history where people weren't blaming the Jews or arguing about them, Simon. You bring up a very, very good point. Black Mirror is asking, a funny situation that the people of the country ruled by a comedian have fallen and is the only summary of this war, and hundreds of people died for the... I don't know what you're referring to. Are you referring to the United States? I don't know. The United States is not run by a comedian. Even if Trump were to get reelected, yes, he was a TV personality, but he wasn't a comedian. Oh, Simon's the best. We love Simon. Thank you, Spencer. Yeah, I love talking about Poland because there's a lot of great history in Poland, and Poland's very underrated. And in many ways, you could argue that the Poles actually kept Europe, or Christian Europe, which was terrified of the Ottomans, from conquering the Ottomans, because it was King John III, Jan Sobieski, who's a Polish hero to this day, who in 1681 broke the siege of Vienna by the Ottomans on September 11th. So 320 years later, on September 11th, the terrorist attacks on the United States. But that date lived in infamy for the Muslim Caliphate, which the Ottomans definitely considered themselves to be at the time because they'd conquered Mecca and Medina by this point for centuries. And so Vienna was liberated by the Poles. The Poles were very strong in the 17th century. Let me see. Yes, Francois, I think that both Donald Trump and Kamala, if they are to vote on Tuesday, will vote for Simon as the best moderator. And we can all come, at a time of such great political division, we can all come together to say that. AGG is asking, why are we not talking about the neo-Nazis right now and what's happening in Germany? Yes, a lot of people believe that the AfD are a resurrection of the Nazis. I haven't read enough about them to say that, but that's a common thing people are saying. They seem to be very right-wing. And here's the thing that I've noticed when observing European politics as an American. Europeans are very quick to point out that American politics is far too conservative and that liberal Democrats in the United States are really just conservatives. There's a converse and other side of the coin to this. When you have mainstream, what I as an American would consider liberal politics, and it's just shades of meaning between the left, the far left, and the left, dominating your political news cycle between the conservatives or the center left and the left. The conservatives and Labour in England come to mind, although the conservatives in England are probably a little bit more to the right than center left, center right-ish, I guess you could say. You create an environment where there isn't a lot of hearing from the diametric opposite. Yeah, there is a lot of disagreement between Labour and conservatives. I'm not saying there are not. But there's a vacuum and space for people with more nativist, isolationist, protectionist, MAGA, but in Germany, make Germany great again, or, stuff like that going around. So you create a vacuum, and what's going to emerge out of that is a right-wing group that might be even more right-wing and reactionary than American conservatives. That as right-wing as American conservatives are, the right in Germany may be even more strident and more fascistic. I don't think that's a real word, but anyways, point being, you create a vacuum in the political spectrum for the far right, for a group on the right, and they're going to make their bed with a right-wing extremist group. And that's what I think of, and that's what I think might be happening with the AfD. I've read some things about them that are interesting, and I've read some things about them that are condemning. So, but in my perspective, yes, the American politics is far to the right of European politics in many, many ways. However, not always, but also there's a vacuum of space where right-wing thinking people will find bedfellows with the most extreme right-wing groups like the AfD. So just a little bit of my perspective there. Yes. What happened to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth? Spencer's asking, why are they separate now? Well, they united for a long time. It was the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the King of Poland. And they united their families like the Austro-Hungarians did with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And they eventually collapsed because the Russians were able to kick their butts. Throughout the 17th century, Tsars Michael I, Alex I, and of course Peter the Great routinely turned Poland into their whipping boy. The Swedish were really powerful in the 17th century. They also beat up the Polish. And despite the fact that Brandenburg Prussia had been founded by Poland, once Prussia was more powerful than Poland, it took huge amounts of land from Poland. So eventually, by the 1700s, Russia, Austria, and Prussia are splitting up Poland. Catherine the Great does this in 1775. It's the first partition of Poland. So there's times and places where Poland's been really strong, but through its own undoing, through its own decline, like all kingdoms and societies and civilizations that decline, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth split apart. Russia takes Lithuania and divides Poland with because Lithuania is part of the Baltic states now, and divides Poland with Austria and Prussia. And that's just less than a century and a half after Poland, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, had given the Frederick line, because they're all named Frederick, control over Brandenburg Prussia. So, interesting stuff there, Spencer. Kamala's mother is South Indian born and a Jamaican father. Yes, thank you, Dublin, for pointing that out. Something that I just don't understand and never will get my head around is the Trump quote where he said, what is she? Is she black or is she Indian? You can be both. You can be two things. Like he can be Scottish and German and, of course, orange. There you go. People can be two things. It's called biracial. Ivan the Terrible, Putin. Yeah, people have made that comparison. There's a lot of love in Russia for despotism. I will say that. Yes, that's true. Her father had Irish ancestry, and something that's very interesting, since I just criticized Trump, I can criticize her side, that she has not acknowledged, although her side seems very keen on acknowledging and apologizing for this a lot of the time. Harris's father is from a line of, and her ancestors on her father's line owned slaves in Jamaica. And that's a reality. A lot of people do not know about the large number of blacks who own slaves throughout the world, even in the United States. But also, the Irish side of that family did own slaves. Her father even told her not to talk about certain racial issues when she first ran for president in 2020 as she ran for vice president, because the family owned slaves. So maybe there's some interesting stuff about her. So both of them have made their blunders. So that's interesting. Most Jamaicans are Nigerian. Yeah, and Jamaicans themselves don't think of themselves as African Jamaicans. Like blacks might think of themselves as African Americans in the United States. A lot of Jamaicans consider Jamaican, because of Jamaican culture has been dominated by people from Africa. You have this emergence of someone being Jamaican as being distinct from African Americans and other blacks throughout the world. African Americans are originally from all parts of Africa. I don't know Grunwald. I'd have to look up that, Spencer, but that's a good question. Seth, good to see you. It's been a long time. El Salvador is the goat. What they're doing with the gangs and their... Yeah, El Salvador has cleaned up their crime. They've been pretty harsh about it, but when you're pretty harsh about crime, you make crime less desirable. Where can you donate? You don't have to donate. I don't have a Patreon. I'm thinking of making one. That would help raise funds for the channel, but just like and subscribe. That's how you become a friendly neighborhood historian. Memes, I really appreciate that. That is maybe the nicest thing anyone said about me today. Chris is saying, a reminder that Trump will be sentenced on 26 November. It's going to be a bad month for Trump. Something tells me that if he wins, that sentencing is just going to dissipate. If he loses, I shouldn't say that might be an opportunity to, that there would be far more reason to believe that he will get convicted. He's been convicted, that he will get sentenced harshly and maybe even put in jail. But something tells me that if he wins the election, that sentencing is gonna go poof in the night. It's really, a lot of people have said that is not gonna stand. Trump is trying to appeal it. There have been presidential candidates who ran when they were in jail. It was seen as a big win for Trump when he pushed the conviction, the sentencing back after his election. So who knows? Yeah, Dublin. Well, interestingly enough, she was raised by her mother. Her parents divorced. She grew up in Canada, and she was raised mainly by her mother. And if you look at a lot of, hello, welcome, MJJ, good to see you. If you look at a lot of her own history, she did tend to practice and live more as Indian than as black, but she is both. Yes, soon enough, Simon. That's the goal. We get monetized, then you guys just watching will get me some money. Um, Dublin, Islam came about to oppose and challenge hippie Christian philosophy. I wouldn't say that so much. That's an interesting perspective, though. I really appreciate that. I would say that Islam emerges from a misunderstanding of Christian theology mixed with a unifying message of peace for the Arab peoples. So something about the Arabs were that they were extremely polytheistic before Muhammad. Muhammad kind of unifies them around the Kaaba, which was already a sacred site in Mecca, and had a tradition and history. And he just said that God who appeared to Abraham is Allah, and there is no other. And that is why the credo of Islam is so strenuously monotheistic, because it is a unifying religion for the Arab peoples, which kind of did away with the ancient paganism and polytheism of the region. So I don't see it as a response to Christianity so much as it is a response to the polytheism common for the Arab peoples in Muhammad's day. Black Mirror is saying 20 years ago, Turkey was rapidly advancing towards becoming a very modern European country. When America intervened in Turkey and meddled in its internal affairs, Turkey became a very difficult country. Yeah, there seems to be Erdogan's rising despotism and things like that. The United States doesn't know the Middle East. And I say that as an American. Yeah, so we've gone over an hour. Thank you, Simon, for pointing that out. But I try to go for everybody's comments because I really appreciate this. And we've actually gone more than an hour. We had a live stream earlier that got interrupted with technical issues, but we've had a really good discussion here. Yeah, I wouldn't. So Dublin's saying two things. He's saying Israel only Middle East country that honors and protects gay rights. I wouldn't say that there's no gay people in Iraq, but I'm saying it's a lot easier to be gay in Israel than it is in Iraq. Gay is evolution and humanity. I don't know about that necessarily. But I don't think it's scientific so much as it is just personal and preferential. Yes, there were Jews all over North Africa and the Middle East. So I talked about the different types of Jews. Ashkenazi being European, and that's what we normally think of Jews. And there being Jews from North Africa, Spain, and the Middle East. These Jews, there were large Jewish populations in North Africa who were later expelled. And in the Middle East were expelled because of Israel's becoming a nation in 1948 and the war with the Mizrahim is Egypt. You were right. The war between Israel and the Arab peoples, the Palestinians. They were expelled. Jews were expelled from areas there. Okay, Semtex, that's an interesting question. I've heard this before. I do historical myth videos on the channel, and one of the historical myths I cover is the identity of Jesus. There's two big historical myths around Jesus of Nazareth's historical identity. One, he was not killed by the Romans. Two, he was a Jew. He was not Palestinian. I'm not saying that with any disrespect meant to the Palestinian people. He wasn't a white man. He wasn't blonde-haired, blue-eyed. He wasn't American. That's not disappointing to me in the slightest. But what I will say is that Jesus lived in a region that now is Palestinian, but that the West Bank back then was part of what was called Judea, which was a Roman province, and Jesus was a Jewish rabbi. He was not a Palestinian. He was that notion is not true. It's kind of retroactively applying history. That's like saying that the Native Americans. What would be a good parallel? The Native Americans are New Yorkers. The Iroquois are New Yorkers. Really? No, they're not. Not in the way we understand New Yorkers. Um, um, that's interesting, Simon. That's a funny perspective. And Simon isn't a historian. Well, he is. In my opinion, anyone who learns about history and loves it is a historian. And being a friendly neighborhood historian, so why be a historian when you can be a friendly historian? And why be a friendly historian when you can be a friendly neighborhood historian in your community? It's as easy as liking and subscribing. That's all. I'm not the friendly neighborhood historian. You guys are if you like and subscribe. King Cyprus, I don't know what you're talking about there. Um, hey, people separate themselves for all sorts of things and all sorts of reasons. Religion was just one of the big ones for a long time. You mean King Cyrus? Are you talking about King Cyrus and the Achaemenid Persian Empire, Cyrus's Edict of Toleration, and how he allowed the Jews to return to Israel in the 500s? That's interesting. You never get your passport stamped. I wonder why. And yes, gay people do indeed have kids. Hello, welcome, Jamie. Good to have you here. I'm sorry I'm being quiet right now. I'm just going through these questions. I got some really great. Yes, this is history. You're probably still here. Hopefully, you're enjoying what you're learning about. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We're about to wrap up here, but we're going to do part 2 tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, our live Q&A every Friday and Saturday now. It used to be Saturday, Sunday. It used to only be Saturday, but we've been growing and people have been asking. And so I've got my third podcast, live stream lecture, I call it, coming out on Sunday about the American election and the history of elections. Let's see. People are bringing up Trump. The Bible is just a watered down version of the Torah. Well, I wouldn't say that so much. The Torah is part of the Bible, and a lot of people call it the Old Testament. I prefer the term Hebrew Bible. The term for all of the Old Testament is the Tanakh. Yeah. Yeah, Angel, I've seen that joke before. Trump for prison. Yes, Matt, that's right. Reagan took out Gaddafi's son, and Gaddafi kind of played nice after that. That's interesting. I don't know enough about Gaddafi's regime. I know he was brutal and repressive, but that might just be the Western story about him. There's no Jewish Indians. There are no Jewish Native Americans, but there are Jews in that's what the Mormon church taught with what I was talking about with the Nephites earlier. But there are Jewish Indians, as in Jews from India, with Indian ancestry and Indian culture. Yeah, Zion. It's just it's like saying the center of the world for Jewish people. Why would God care where you live? That seems dumb. Well, it's an interesting perspective. It's not where God. It's perhaps using God to mean the society and the culture around you. Yes, I like how you changed from there are no Jews to there are some very small Jews. Are you a news reporter? I'm just kidding. It's not a huge number. It's not an overwhelming number, but there are a significant number. And India is a huge country anyways. Most people, the largest in the world, population-wise. So, yes, there are Jews in Mumbai. There's Orthodox communities in Mumbai. Yes, there are. You are absolutely right about that. India's largest population in the world, and so any community less than 10,000 is minute. Yes, that's absolutely true. So, but 10,000 people is 10,000 people. Well, Eric, I think I can guess who you're voting for. Let's see here. Global, you could say that. It can be, depending on the people group. And I would encourage people to travel all over the world, not just to Israel or India. Yeah, I don't know if he wants to take back Alaska. He wants to take back the Baltic states after he's done with Louis. He wants to take back the Baltic states after he's done with Ukraine. Yeah, well, the Jews are extremely good with different types of work and labor. And in fact, when they left the Russian Empire, all of the skilled classes of labor were gone, and it tanked the Russian economy and helped lead to their revolution. Yes, I agree with you. That's how we have to treat people. Unique individuals. Yes, and it's a crossroads between Russia and its frigid land and Western Europe. So yes, I agree. Poland was definitely a crossroads. Gunnar, welcome. Can you be bisexual? I think, sure, why not? Gunnar is saying, I think that when most governments these days have turned into far less left organizations, the ordinary working class people seek solace in a political party that is the, yes. And there just seems to be this tendency, Gunnar, that the left now is the party of the elite. And that's how a lot of Americans seem to think. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's perspective. And I'm saying that the Germans see that. The reform movement in Britain, which is the far more conservative version of a Labour Party, seems to think that as well. So, trying to catch up with the chat. I'm trying to speed round it. Please dance. Good to see you. Please like and subscribe. We're going to be wrapping up. So, I'm going to have my AMA tomorrow. So, any things I've gotten... I'm so glad you're here, Seth. We're always glad that you're here. Okay, let's see here. A dance of words. Are we close to World War III? We might very well be. I've been talking about that a lot. Can get more into detail about that. War is constant. Definitely, if you look around at human history, there's always a war going on. Just catching up on the channel. Okay, I think we're almost done. I think we're going to call it there, guys, because, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed what you liked hearing about, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Tell all your family and friends. We are going to wrap it up. 70 minutes. That's a long time, but we had a lot of fun. Simon, I had a lot of fun. I hope you had a lot of fun. It is 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. on the Pacific Coast, and I believe midnight in Britain, for those of you blokes who are joining us from there. But really enjoy this, as always, and I will see you guys tomorrow. I will take one more historical question or topic, my last call of the night. This is the bar of history. I had that somebody else who did that. That was not me. I'm stealing from someone. So good to see you. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Any last questions? Any last topics? Did I miss something in the chat? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Adam, for just dropping in that incendiary bomb at the end of our chat. Yeah, I would agree, Gunnar. We are Gunnar, thank you for joining us from England. I will say, Gunnar, to your point, what you were saying earlier, we are drawing more and more people into this fray. There seems to be more and more parties invested in the possibility of a war, and that's how global conflicts start. That's how World War I started. It could be how World War III started. Although, if you want to learn about how I think that this would not be World War III if it started, but it would be World War IV, and that World War I was World War II, and World War II was World War III, and you want to learn about the First World War, come back tomorrow and ask me about what I think the First World War was, and I will tell you all about it. Really interesting stuff. But yes, time is a measurement of decay. That's all I know. Thank you. Have a great night, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Hello, welcome, but also goodbye. Have a good night. See you tomorrow, 4 p.m. on the West Coast. Good night, guys.